good evening. My name is Richard Clark and I'm going to be talking about Throwback Thursday, about my favourite albums. And today I'm actually going to be interviewing the person who actually did this album. So this is Strangeronearth by a lady called Lina. So Lina is an R&B jazz singer from America, and this album came out in 2001. So now, as of today, I'm going to actually be talking to the artist about how they created this album, when it was created, and the things they actually dealt with as an artist to create this piece of work. So good morning, Lina. I know you're in Dubai, usually you're in LA, but just tell me about this album, what you liked about it, why it was so important to your life, and so forth.
That's the UK version of Strangeronearth.
Yes, yeah, so, European, yeah.
So we did two versions. We did a US version, and that's the UK version.
Oh, yeah.
So they had a couple of songs on it that were different, you know.
Yeah.
But album was called Strangeronearth, and that was inspired by Craig Callman, who was he was over my project. He also signed me at Atlantic Records, and he introduced me to that song. He had a collection crate of jazz once I showed him what I was into before I signed the deal. And I found out about the song Strangeronearth, listened to the lyrics, and it fit what I was going through at that time, especially the music business being so different, because there was a lot of, you know, the 90s pop, R&B, and hip hop. And then here I come with this jazz, hip hop, big band sound.
Which was probably different to the time, because if you think about 1999, 2000, I mean, like we now know Timbaland is super produced, but still Timbaland wasn't blowing up, only in the R&B world, but not in the pop world.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of artists who'd kind of fizzled out for a while as well in the 90s. There was a lot of what sometimes people did one album, never did anything, one song. It was like that, wasn't it? So, but go and explain about the production side, because I think this is where people may not know about the album, because it's very hard to find information about you online. So this would be why you can do this. It'd be helpful.
It's funny that you bring up Timbaland, because the producer that I was working with, that I started the project with, based out of Los Angeles, his name was T-House, Travis John House. He was a Timbaland fan. So he loved Timbaland, Missy, and that whole crew. But we call him Rain Man, because he is a musical genius. And he had all these ideas, as well as me having all this creative styles, and we put that together. So his drum style was kind of like Timbaland's.
You can hear that on actual Playanomore, and there was a couple of others, because I remember when I heard that album, because I was doing my music degree actually. Mm-hmm. And when I heard this, because I loved Bachelor by Genuine and Missy's the album with I Can't Stop the Rain and everything, and the way Timbaland would do beats, so you had that, like, you know, that kind of shuffle beat, that boom, and I remember that stuff, which is very much on your album, and it's actually, when you're mentioning it, I think I can hear it more now. But what I loved about it, because I saw it where it's like you kind of got the balance right. Because I think at that time there was a lot of overproduced R&B, and I think there was occasionally that artists like yourself, like Genuine, there was just them few artists, maybe D'Angelo and Maxwell, but again they weren't regularly releasing albums. So you'd hear these voices with these great production, which was very much a slight kilter to what was actually in the commercial world, which I thought was always good. I thought,
yeah, it was a good time. Yeah, it was a good time for music. I missed it. But yeah, I got a 4-year scholarship to Howard University for 17th century Baroque and classical music. That's one of my miracle stories, because they didn't scout me. I was given a scholarship to a Mississippi college and then another college in Texas, but I wanted to go to Howard. So I walked on that campus and just auditioned. They had an audition going that day. So I started doing my opera in 17th century Baroque and classical music, and then I got signed. So that song Playanomore that you mentioned, we were trying to figure out, like, what do I do? I like opera, 17th century Baroque and classical. I love jazz standards. I love big band. I love hip hop. Love R&B and standard jazz. So the first single, Playanomore, the first single is opera style vocals. with, like you said, that beat, that syncopation with the big band samples. So that was the very first song we did for the album.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't being done. So of course, when Craig Calvin heard it and the Atlantic Records staff, it was like, what is this? Like, it's intriguing. It feels good, but what is it? What do we call this?
And I think that's the thing. It becomes what we call a hybrid music. So it doesn't follow directly into the genre.
Right.
One of the reasons why I've got this, because like my top 100 albums, when I'm talking about these albums, a lot of it, what I'm doing is a lot of albums some people don't know. So like, for example, I've got one album I've mentioned by Fleetwood Mac, hardly anyone knows, but it's a really good written album. And what I've always liked about music albums is what I've done with this series is that I'm trying to show people about creativity, which is slightly not just obvious. You know, I mean, like my number one Thriller album by Michael Jackson, which is obviously a pop masterpiece. But secondly, it's like Hear My Dear by Marvin Gaye, which is probably his like very off-kilter album. So I kind of, what I was trying to do with this whole series was show that. But I think one thing I love, especially about your music, especially the production as well as your voice, is when I think about your voice, it reminds me like, yes, you love the jazz music, the Billie Holidays, the Sarah Vaughans, but then like when you do like your opera stuff and that sort of stuff, and you can hear it, it's like you can hear Minnie Riperton, you can hear all these things, and it's interesting because where I think you push your like academically as well as musically, you push your limits quite a lot. Whereas a lot of people I find especially with music albums, they work a safe space. So what they do is they do 2 really big hits and the rest of the album's full of filler. And that was a huge problem at that time in that sort of 99, 2000, sort of 2000 to about 5. There was a lot of albums where you had 2 good hits and that was it. Whereas your album as a collective was really, was impressive. The reason why I had the vinyl of this as well was because at uni, I used to do a night, which was it was like a lounge night. So I used to play Minnie Riperton, stuff like this, jazz, neo soul, and I was getting stuff from America. So I'd talk to someone that's like, oh, Jazzy Fat Nasty's done an album. And I'd say, right, can you send me the album? And then the record company said, yeah, here, just send me an album. And I had it wasn't on radio, nothing. It was just something I created. And it was in Coventry, which is like near Birmingham. It wasn't a big area, but I used to do this whole thing of that, and it was just had it was like people had a shisha bar. That's how I done it, and I always wanted to do one in London, but the thing of it was to create that kind of speakeasy idea. That was how I thought I was going to do that, and I think it's something when people don't think about music as the experience. So to me. That to me is also the key of any of these albums. It's like most of these albums, if you ever look at the list, they are albums as a collective piece of work, but the song standards on them are excellent individually. So it's something I kind of look at when I'm talking about an album, and why someone says to me, I think I've only got 3 albums in this whole 100, which are written in the last sort of 5-6 years, because I just don't find albums are written that well anymore. They just, and especially with streaming now, it's like make as much money with one song. But with your also, because you were talking about Playanomore, one of the things I was going to ask you about when you were talking about this jazz influence, because you had that influence.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a bit when you were doing the album, it sort of not channeled, but in some respects it came to you through that jazz, you felt you wanted to give that a new voice, because jazz music for a long time in the 90s had gone a bit what I call, sounds horrible, like smooth FM. It was like something you play at the background of a barbecue, but it wasn't like jazz music wasn't impacting, like old jazz music does that if you listen to it, whereas it kind of
and it's true. But for me, the standard jazz and the singers and the instrumentalists, the people who played in the band, because there was no sampling, is that person playing each instrument, rehearsing all together, becoming one. So it had to me an authentic spirit about it that couldn't be duplicated, So that's why when we did sample, we didn't want to replay it. We wanted that spirit on the track. So the standard jazz, what it does for me, it just stimulates me. Like when you were talking about pushing, my limits. It's really inspiring to listen to a Sarah Vaughan vocal and hear how she, speaks to her guy who's playing the instruments and his own special thing that he does that no one's gonna do that night, and it may be different the next night. That whole experience, like with every album, because most of them recorded live albums back then, So whenever I would listen to it, it would inspire me to the point to where I did think I gotta share this with somebody. We didn't have buttons where we could just take the video and put it in, and share it on Facebook.
Right.
So I wanted to, my peers, my generation, I wanted to educate them about all these great singers, because to me it had so much life in it and so many lessons, and so it was such a vibe. It is such a vibe. And being here in Dubai, when I listen to the radio stations and they're doing these interviews of people who are doing Bitcoin or restaurant owners or chefs, culinary people, they do interviews with artists, and they're all talking about Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington. They're still here in this country, talking about those artists as their favorite singers and musicians, and how they inspire them when they're cooking or when they're painting or when they're trading or whatever. And I found that to be interesting, because in the States, we don't talk about it, but of course I realized as a singer, you're always going to work if you do standard jazz.
Yeah. I think one of the things I was thinking of actually an album before yours came out was Guru did Jazzsamples, the third album called Street Soul. And I remember playing that out, and someone said I played something, they'd be like, "Oh, who's that?" And I'd be like, "Oh, it's Guru, da 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 da." And it was interesting that it was like, because it's so not pushed. But I think also another thing is that a friend of mine, he does streaming playlists. And I was talking to him about I was going to interview today. And he said to me, one thing he said to me was about, with your first album, he said, so interesting that it's nearly 22 years old. And he said, that stuff still sounds fresh now. So he puts it on his playlists, and he does he works with Spotify and so forth. And now this is a guy who literally, he has to listen to nearly 300-400 tracks a week, which he then releases as stuff for that week. So this is something he does as his playlist. Now, so obviously with him, he's listening to stuff, and he says to me, like, a lot of the stuff I just listen to, there's too much music, not enough stuff that's interesting. And he said, and where he finds most of the interesting stuff, none of it is English speaking singing usually. And he says a lot of it is coming from all across the world. Like, I mean, his thing is like the Afro beats thing is like obviously improved. But I think what I think is going to be interesting in the next few years is, once more people, I do think there is going to be a movement in R&B music which has to kind of go jazz way, because I think the trap sound's kind of had its day. I think it's kind of lost its. I mean, I like it in its. To me, trap is great. If you go to Atlanta and you've gone to a strip club, that's what trap is for me. It's not, to me, outside of that, it doesn't really have anything for me. And I have done that years ago, so I know what it's like. You know, when you're in Atlanta, you hear that stuff. Like, oh, I get it, but on your like headphones and stuff, I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. But I feel that with music now, it has to go in varying things, and I think actually where it will go is what is actually something I was going to ask you is, because you've done a film already, Santa Baby, you did for the Christmas film. And then we talked about Idlewild once, which was the Outcast did that film with the jazz music idea. And I've always wondered, is there been something you've ever thought in the back of your mind doing a film where either you play Sarah Vaughan or play one of them characters, and they've asked you to do that or something like that?
I have actually the movie that you just brought up this Christmas, the way he found out about me is I was playing Ella Fitzgerald in an independent film that never got released. But definitely, my managers, Jadar and Entertainment, they are who brought me to Dubai. And this is the second show that we've done. The first one was in Jamaica this year, but every year we go out of the country and entertain. But we are putting together, I did a full Billie Holiday tribute album. It's done, it's recorded. So now we're going to put together a show, and it's pretty interesting how we're going to do it because it's going to incorporate the audience and creating that whole scene. And then pitch that to Vegas, where you have, when you come, you have to be dressed in gear, because once you step inside, you're sent back in time. And then you may have.
It is interesting. Vegas is becoming like that because a lot of people are moving out of LA to Vegas. There's good restaurants in Vegas. Vegas is changing because obviously Vegas was actually created by the gangsters' money for that, and that's how then the jazz scene took on. Exactly. But I think that just shows you that the power of that music is something obviously people still want. It's because it's been forgotten about so much because the rest of the commercial level's been pushed so much. But I think it will change. But like that sounds a great experience. I mean, hopefully I'll when I can get to the States again, I'll have to try and check it out. But it's but yeah, I think another thing I wanted to ask as well, like that sounds a great experience what you're doing, is with a lot of jazz music, which a lot of people don't understand, is because it was filmed so long ago, or it was done so long ago. Lots of it wasn't filmed. A lot of it due to segregation, because it would be a black artist performing to a whole white audience. Is people don't understand that whole background of that. So with yourself, when you were doing your music, did you ever find that people found it difficult to place you in a genre or place you to an audience in some respects?
Yeah, at the record label.
Yeah,
it was difficult.
Yeah. Sorry, that's what I was kind of alluding to. I didn't want to blame them, but I just was what I was trying to explain. Yeah,
and that was a part of the struggle because as an African American artist, they expect to place you in R&B, hip hop, but they didn't. Yeah. They kind of had me in the middle. Like even when there was a Grammy category created for my music, when Skip Miller, I don't know if you know who Skip Miller is. He was my manager. Yeah. He said the same thing you said about Minnie Riperton. He said, I hear Minnie Riperton, I hear Diana Ross. Whenever I was singing the different styles, he was awesome. He was on the Grammy board, and so they created a category which was alternative R&B. Well, Scott got nominated in that category, and I think she won in that category. I only got nominated, but that category is no longer. It was there for a little while. But it's because they couldn't find a place to put my music. And but the Sarah Vaughn's and the Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, they trailblazed for me by the time I came in, artists like me, that we didn't have a lot of the issues that we had that they had based on race. By that time, we could play anywhere and we were welcomed and praised for what we were doing, but it was because these artists had passed away, their ancestors now, but they saw how much this music impacted the parents that listened to it. So now you got these record execs and these fans now who know about these artists, and they broke down the walls for, racial discrimination by the time I'm there. So I'm standing on their shoulders. Artists like me and artists now are standing on their shoulders, but music, the universal language. It just brought us all together. And going to Europe, where did I meet you, in Austria?
No, I've never actually met you physically. I've only met you.
Oh,
I've known about your music for years because I always wanted to work at, actually when they did the second album with Hidden Beach, I was trying to work at Sony, and I wanted to. I kept trying to get a job at Sony with the guy at Sony Urban was Steve Ripley, and I tried to get a job with him.
That's Steve Ripley.
Yeah, I know Steve. I know Steve for years. And so I kept trying to get in that label, and I always said I wanted to promote Hidden Beach, Neo Soul. I wanted to promote. Wow. He does that now independently, but I wanted to do all that. So, when I went for Universal Music, I had to do digital and I had to do all the general stuff, and I never wanted to do that. I was always wanted to do alternative. I would have done things like this with interviews with artists, have EPKs. That's how I wanted to do it. So it was more or less I was doing marketing, managing, but I wanted to also get artists to do like little tours like you're doing now, but getting a load of you together. So, instead of it like saying being kindred family soul on their own, I would have had you, them, Darius Rucker, whoever it was from Hidden Beach.
And I would have loved being Hidden Beach.
Well, trouble is Sony wouldn't take me on. He wanted to take me on. He wanted to take me on. Yeah. And it was just like we couldn't.
Like you. Yeah. That's what the label was based on. People like you who are passionate about music.
But also, I'd done a music degree. Most of the people they take on in record companies in the UK, they don't even have a music background. So the only way I would have ever been able to do that was either I had to become, like, say you came over and I was your English manager there. Yeah. That's the only way I could have done it. But I mean, there's a lot of actual what Steve Ripley set up there was mostly when you hear about, say, DJ Semtex, that was someone who worked on his street team. A lot of these people all were from him. So every other label that's done well with in the last 20 years is from what Steve Ripley set up there under Sony Urban or Sony R&B. So it was kind of, it's an interesting thing with that because it never kind of, to me in the UK, there should have been a massive market for that. I mean, JazzCaff did well, but it never really pushed, like, for example, there were so many artists to be at JazzCaff. And unless the artists brought their CDs, JazzCaff wouldn't allow you to break your own CDs to sell there. I mean, it's like just madness, like how backward the music industry was back then. And now everybody's like, stream this, stream that. There's promotion all the time. It's just different, you know. But yeah, that was my thing. So yes, I ended up working at Universal in digital, which is why once I got into digital, I didn't like it. I found that I was working with iTunes and I could see where streaming was going. And this was like 13, 15 years ago. I just was like, I got to get out because this to me is not going to help artists. To me, the way it works with artists, you've got to, live to me is always the thing artists make the most money on. And I think if labels promote them correctly and they link it together, it works. Now, because a lot of people get these 360 deals, you know, they're taking their live revenue, they're taking their merchandise. And a lot of artists now, even you notice in music videos, if they do have them, everything's sponsored by something. So you'll watch a video and it's like, they'll be drinking a drink, which is sponsoring the video. It's just like, it's like a marketing, it's like watching a supermarket on the music video. It's terrible. But
it's true.
It's what they do. And I think that's because the revenue wise, labels are making more money than they ever have from streaming, but artists are struggling. So it's a weird thing. So anyway, so I have got to talk to you about your second album as well, but we'll do that another time because I want to talk about the Hidden Beach thing of that and why you did that album with another label, but we'll talk about that another time when you've got time to talk with me again. But anything you want to say about people, how they can find the album? Because the thing is, it's obviously Atlantic, make the money, get to it and everything, but
well, I still have my innocence about music. I did it for people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It would be awesome if record labels were different, but they weren't. So I started my own label, and I have written and engineered 3 albums in 3 different genres. I'll let you know more about that later, that I will be releasing in 2024 on my own label. And now I'm a music engineer, so I mixed it and I did it my way. I mixed it my way. I don't, just like when I was doing my music with the label. Most of the music that I recorded, I already had before I signed the deal. I went in, then I recorded a few more songs with input from the label. But there was always a standard of how it should be recorded, how it should be mixed. But I hear something different. So I mixed my album the way I hear it, you know, and as we go, you got an Erykah Badu who's different from a Lauryn Hill, who's different from a Beyonce. So they all have their own style. So I always just believe in having your own style and not following, but doing what's in your heart and being as creative as possible. So with this music, I did it my way.
But it's interesting. Some of the names you mentioned. See, Lauryn Hill, I don't have her album. I've got a thing about Lauryn Hill. Not to be horrible about artists, but I think Lauryn Hill, that Mid-Education, I've just never liked that album. I think that's been a very overhyped album.
She's extremely talented, though.
She's talented, but I just think after that, she did the Unplugged album, which actually wasn't bad, but it was more like an EP. But she decided, I think because of label politics, and now she hasn't released any new music properly for.
It can be hard. It's hard. I mean, I went at least 4 years without recording and having anxiety every time I went in the studio. And it was because of the politics and the business of music that can hinder your creativity. I get what she's going through. You know, I understand. And especially as big as she is, you know, she has fans, like massive fans and massive success. And then, you know, having to deal with all the politics, it can be heavy. So
that's the thing I never understood, because I know she obviously had legal problems a few years ago. She re-signed with Sony, and I always thought that was a really weird. I know why she did it legally for reasons, but I was just like, why don't you do independent? Because she's got such a big fan base, and all it needed was just a good team of her to go around and say, look, do it independently. Because I think Lauryn Hill would have less pressure on her. She could do. She's good live as well. When she turns up on time, that's another thing. But when she's live, the stuff she does live is excellent. It's so different to the albums, and I just think if you'd done an independent and you went independent, you would do so much better. And I just think that's where I think a lot of it is. Oh, look, it's hard. I mean, I know it's been hard for you. It's not easy.
It's a big job to be independent. I mean, and then I don't know. It's because even with me, like I have to change hats. Some artists are just artists. It can't do all of that. You know what I'm saying? They need to stay in the studio. I can leave the studio and I can go type up a resume or go engineer a project. But for the most part, artists, sometimes I'm like that too. It just depends. You know, I'm a Libra, so I get to be balanced.
Yeah.
But most artists are artists and the business people are business people. Wearing those two hats can make you crazy.
It's hard actually when you're doing holistic stuff as well, because I love doing holistic work and that stuff. The idea of, like, I've got my friend, he's my lawyer as well. He does my website, right? I hate websites. I can't stand. Sorry?
I hate social media.
Yeah, that's why I've come off Instagram. I've cut off TikTok. I just want to go to YouTube and LinkedIn. Facebook's just to show that I exist and I'm not dead. I mean, It's just literally. I just find it's like self-flagellation all the time, and I don't like that.
For us, that's hard for us.
Yeah,
that part.
And it's so for me, I would rather. And sometimes it's weird because I'll do a video, even with this, do a video, and like some videos they really take off. Like some has shocked me how, like one video I was really surprised to off. I did a review about a Barry White album, and that was like one of the most viewed videos on music albums. Wow. But then I also, with rights, I did one about Sign of the Times for Prince. I did a really good one explaining it. They blocked it for YouTube, and I literally and I had to change loads of the music samples used and everything, and it was a shame because it's like I don't understand this with another thing with labels. When you're promoting or you're talking about an album or talking about an artist and you're playing their music, right? I'm not going to make money out of Prince's song of the Sign of the Times. That I'm actually promoting it to get people to listen to it, new audiences to go, oh, I'm going to check that out. I'm going to listen, stream it. I may buy that out.
Right, that's what you would think.
It's like people don't think in the business world of if you had a product and it's a really good product, say skincare product or good food product, supplement product, you don't say to someone, oh, I don't want you promoting my supplement product because you don't work for the company. What you want them to do is say, yeah, promote my product because I want your audience. Right. But the music industry don't think like that. It's like so weird.
It's that US thing. It's that thing of
it's always rights with US.
Because you'll get followers. If you have a good interview, they don't want you to have anything. It's about keeping you in your place and because if the interview is good, even though it's with Prince and it promotes them, it still promotes you. And it's just something that's what I was talking about earlier before we got on camera. The spirit of the US when it comes to stopping another person from surviving, and only this group can survive. And where I am, Dubai, everybody gets a chance. If you're willing to work, you would think that that's how, it would be. I'm promoting your
Well,
artists should be okay with that.
Especially the ethos of America is the land of the free. It's like it's the land of the free only for the people who they want to have the opportunity. It's and it's very strange because it's actually one of the things I did like about iTunes when they first came out, because I thought the way iTunes did it, if you did the long tail and people did articles, I still think that with iTunes, the way it could be promoted, it would have benefited artists because you were still getting sales, though it wasn't like physical sales, it was more direct.
Yeah.
Streaming is, because what my issue with streaming I have is this: if you've got a good loads of computers and servers, you could easily fix and make out people have actually got loads of streams, where it's just a load of computers with servers under different accounts. So when I hear that someone says, oh, Drake's the best streamed artist, I'm like, is Drake the best streamed artist, or is it Universal Music have paid for a load of streamers in Silicon Valley or Russia or wherever it is to do that?
Well, they had to do something because we don't depend on labels anymore. They're still controlling it, except now you're getting less. Because at first it was we choose who we're gonna sign. So that's a very small amount of people, but then the internet made it possible for people to go to SoundCloud and get discovered and have streams. And so basically it's just another way to control you and your earnings and your income on your own, separate from the machine.
It's an issue I had working in digital, because they used to ask me how I streamed music and downloaded music, and when I was at the job in Universal. I said, I could tell you. I said, but one, you're not paying me a permanent contract. So until you've got me I've got some insurance and the rest of it, you're not getting that information because you're paying me like a temp. Two, I don't like the way you're going to do that. To me, you're shutting down people having access to music. And I said, if you do it correctly and make it affordable and make it that people don't feel demonized, I said, that will work for you. So when I was at Universal, they had an argument with MySpace, right? And it backfired on them because MySpace was owned by Rupert Murdoch's son at the time, right? He took it over. So Universal did this, oh, you've released Jay-Z's Kingdom Come album too early, we're going to sue you. So Rupert Murdoch's son went, okay, I'm going to put some articles about the head of Universal Music and slate him. And that's what he did. So he used this. So there was always this kind of, everything was personal. Nothing was about improving the artist, improving people's access. And it was crazy. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, we'll find another way around it.
But I think we'll have to talk about independent artists as another talk. I think that'd be interesting. I know you've got a guy. I can see you into the side. I'll stop the recording. Thank you for this interview today.
Oh, thank you for all your support throughout the years. I appreciate you.